Welcome to Industry Ignited, where innovators turn tough challenges into practical wins. Today, I'm joined by Charlles Bohdy, CEO of NANEAU, whose team is reinventing how we use water for wellness, hospitality, and agriculture. We'll talk about his path, the idea that sparked it all, and how he's bridging a new kind of supercharged water to the real world. Charlles, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Charlles, you've worked across many industries over the years. Can you share a bit about that journey and how it shaped the way you approach problem solving?
Yes. Well, in my earliest inception of my career, I started my first business in my early 20s. And what I was told was the very best technology possible for that industry turned out to be terrible, really. Yet it still passes for industry standard today. And I realized that if I wanted to be the best, I had to come up with my own solutions. So that began my, 35-year-old quest of product development, where we learned to develop our own solutions that go beyond the industry standards to truly solve problems for clients.
And you've actually described your specialty as solving the impossible. What does that mean to you, and how has it shown up in your career?
Well, what it means is that I don't look inside the box for solutions. I accept as a given that there's always a way to solve the problem, and then we just look for the most effective, efficient way to do it. One of the ways I like to do it is I start by reviewing Google Scholar. A lot of people will search the regular internet, and I like to search peer-reviewed papers to see what's the cutting edge coming out of the universities today. And then from that, I can often develop a solution that is based on the latest research. So I know it'll work in advance because it's already been proven in the laboratory, but not scaled up to real world.
Yeah, that makes sense. Going out to see the technology that exists, what they're currently researching, and what's at the forefront of new innovation and what people are curious about and innovating in the space. What first led you into the world of advanced water technology? Was there a moment when you realized water could be the platform for global solutions?
Well, I have two heroes. They're the two greatest minds, in my opinion, of the 20th century. Both of them are widely unknown in the general populace. One, his name is Nikola Tesla, and he is the guy that they named the car after, not the car. And the other one is an even rarer name. His name is Victor Schauberger. And Victor Schauberger would come to be known as the father of biomimicry. And his philosophy was study nature, understand it, and then copy it. And so Victor really pioneered the use of realizing that nature had already developed the most efficient ways to do things. So rather than reinventing the wheel, find out how it was done in nature and then apply that to real-world solutions. And when I encountered his work, one of the first things he did is he built a log flume, which is like a big chute to transport wood over long period, miles and miles from forests up in the mountains down to where they could get it to the lumber mill. This is at the turn of the 20th century. And he built a log flume that was able to go 3 times further than modern hydrological science said was possible. In fact, when they looked at his log flume, they said it would be impossible and it would never work. And it didn't follow a straight line. It followed a sinusoidal pathway like a river, like a snake, serpentine. And he discovered that water has different densities at different temperatures, and he was able to float heavier than wood logs, which every scientist that examined it said it would never work. Yet it did, and it worked ultra effectively. So when I began to look at his research into water, and he studied how trout are able to swim upstream against a current that would knock a 250-pound man over in a rushing stream. Here they are apparently defying gravity, going up, leaping up against these giant waterfalls. And when I started researching all of the work that he'd done in vortexing and water and discovering that water has a memory and It isn't a simple H2O chemical molecule that we learned about in high school. It really set my mind to fire.
Yeah, that's super fascinating to think about, right? So in nature, rivers meander. They don't go in a straight line. And so
Never.
looking at that is actually that is more efficient and allows greater transport than going in a straight line. And so really observing how things are in nature and considering maybe nature has the answers that we just have to discover.
Yeah,
That's
that work
super
was
interesting.
later carried on by a Swedish physicist, and he would take flocculant and put it on top of a tank so that you could see things floating on the surface. Then he would drag a stick through the water, and always the water would make a sinusoidal path. It would never follow a straight line. No matter what straight forces you put on water, it doesn't go in a straight line. It always is trying to spiral, vortex, and move sinusoidally. So
Hmm.
this is sort of like the basis of how I got weird in water.
Very cool. And so, how did your interest in nanoplasmoid technology and these specialized nanobubbles come about? And what convinced you it could make a real difference?
Well, I was working with a technology that was developed by a former partner of mine. He's an 86-year-old chemist metallurgist, and he developed a technology that is now marketed under the brand name Cocoon. And what he was doing is he was working with some rare platinum group metals. He was plating them out in a gold making or refining process. And he had an odd ore sample that was coated with a really unusual combination of platinum metals. And he discovered that in this tank, he was using the metals he was plating the metals out so he didn't lose them. And he discovered that when the metals built up on the plates, he started noticing bubble formation in the water. And as he began testing the water, he discovered that it was loaded with H2, it was loaded with long chain heavy peroxides, and it was loaded with these isotopes of oxygen from O8 to O64. And a doctor in Europe was hired by them to start validating the technology, and they marketed under the brand name Cocoon, Kaqun. And I was privy to the amazing healing responses that people that would drink this water and soak in a bathtub full of it would happen in their body. So it would trigger a set of the immune system's auto healing. And people were having amazing recoveries from all sorts of different conditions by just, having access to the water and the gases. So when we went our separate ways, I began looking at ways to extend the life of the gas in the water. Our body is molecularly 96 or more percent water. They say 70% water, but when you really weigh it, it's the majority. We're just big, bold water bags walking around. And so, when we look at our body's processes, we use gases for signaling. They may call them redox signaling molecules. Sometimes they're called gasotransmitters. And so we're using gases inside our body at all times to transmit information, to initiate healing processes and the like. And so when you're in the cocoon bathtub, the majority of the hydrogen that's being liberated is escaping through the surface of the water because hydrogen's the lightest molecule. So I'd been looking at ways to apply some Schaubergerian principles to this electrolytic technology to improve it. And that was our first improvement as we developed some structuring and some new geometries in the way that we were processing the water. But the light bulb went off for me when I saw a little Japanese guy give a speech on nanobubbles at a conference that I was at. And I'd been looking at gas stripping technologies from the soda industry, and it was the real light bulb. So we ended up going into the laboratory, and I hired a former Area 51, rocket scientist, and we started developing the technology that became NANO and applying the science of the nano to the science of the cocoon. And the synthesis was greater than the sum of the parts. And we've practiced manipulating electrical fields and changing geometries in order to get what's become metastable nanoplasmoids. So a nanoplasmoid is really a charged form of gas inside of a nanobubble. Now, what makes a nanobubble unique is once a bubble gets under 100 nanometers, the physics changes. It's called a zeta potential shift. There's a huge net negative electrical charge that's generated. The van der Waal forces on the inside and the outside of the bubble get very, very strong. And traditional nanobubbles can last for months. Our metastable nanoplasmoids we've kept in bottles for years. And because they're all the same charge, they're not able to agglomerate to other bubbles. So in traditional bubble formation, it's called coalescence. A small bubble is attracted to another small bubble and other small bubbles, and then they get bigger and bigger, and then they rise to the surface and they break. With a nanoplasmoid, that just isn't possible because the net negative electrical charge is the same. So that means if they try to come together, they're repelled electromagnetically and they can't come together. And this keeps them from being able to get big enough to rise to the surface and break. And in fact, it creates a torsion field inside of the bubble that looks just like a donut. They call it a toroid. And that form of plasma inside of the bubble has some really phenomenal properties when it comes to physiology.
You showed me a picture of what they look like, and they're beautiful. Very interesting, formation within the bubble itself. And so what does this difference mean? I mean, what do the nanobubbles properties bring to science?
They're just used for hundreds of applications across a wide variety of industries. They use them to keep pipes from having, calcium buildup on the inside and stripping the pipes down. They use them for increasing the efficacy of biodigesters and methane production. They use them for increasing flocculation and water purification. And they use them in agriculture to increase the amount of oxygen that gets to the roots, to make the plants grow bigger. They use them in hydroponics as a form of a mist to mist the plants with carbon dioxide nanobubbles in water. So they're giving the plants carbon dioxide through the leaf in the form of water. And the list goes on and on. My interest, of course, is what happens to the body when it's given, a better form of water. And so we're not just dealing with, prior to running the water through our nano machine, we're also processing it. And so, I had to look at how to take any source water, like a municipal supply, and make it like a spring. And so we developed a filtration system that physically removes viruses up to 7 nines. That's 99.9999999. And we do bacteria to 10 nines, so 99.99999999999%. And we're physically removing the dead carcass from the water. And that's big because, UV and some of these other chlorine, it'll kill them. But then the dead bacteria and the dead virus body is still in the water, and it can become food for other pathogens. So we're physically removing that. We then remove the toxic elements like, cadmium and manganese and uranium and any source metals that are bad for you to drink. We're leaving trace calcium and cobalt and copper and the good minerals that our bodies require. And we're doing it all in a very novel fashion using successive layers using electrical charge. So after we start by processing that water and getting out the stuff we don't want, we then have to deal with the secondary component, which is the memory of water. And that's one of the things that Schauberger started to prove, that Masaru Emoto continued on, that the German physicist who wrote The World in a Drop continued his research and making it, applying the scientific method to Emoto's work. And we've discovered that, according to Professor Bill Tiller of Stanford, water is a cage-like molecule capable of storing frequencies and information. And so just, physically removing the contaminant doesn't remove the memory from the water. So we then begin running it through a series of vortexing magnetic fields to begin to tumble and erase the memory of the water. We run it past catalytic discs, which change the calcium to aragonite, so it doesn't want to build up on the inside of your pipes and clog your hot water tank heating element and things. And then we run it through a true biofield imprinting, vortexing, structuring device. And that's a big mouthful, but we're basically putting the memory of life back into the water. So we're getting rid of the old bad memory and we're giving it a new healthy memory. And we've got studies that are done on plants showing 20 to 250% yield increases on row crops, fruits, and vegetables. And a plant really subject to it's not subject to the placebo effect. So if it works on a plant, it's definitely good for you.
Right. Yeah, I was going to ask, why is it important to remove that old memory?
Yeah, because when we flush our toilets and when we turn on our sinks, all that stuff goes down the drain and it ends up back at the water treatment plant. And that includes every prescription drug known to man, all the lithium and everything from Viagra to different types of breathing drugs, heart medicines, statins. It's all going into the water supply. And the memory of it is still there, even if we physically remove it. And we don't really do a lot to filter. We do more flocculation and chlorination than we do true filtration. So, our municipal water has to be within a series of standards, but those standards leave a lot of room for improvement, let's say.
Yeah. Now, one of the fascinating parts of your technology is that you can infuse water with different gases like hydrogen, carbon dioxide, and nitric oxide, each with its own effects. How do you decide which gases to use and what kinds of benefits have you seen from them?
Well, I like to call our technology NBOT or NPBOT. People have become familiar with hyperbaric oxygen chambers, which is called an HBOT. And what they're doing in a hyperbaric chamber is they're pressurizing the air or pure oxygen to 2 atmospheres in the hard-sided units to, 1.25, maybe 1.3 in the soft-sided units to try and drive more oxygen into the tissues. And we can put 1.5 billion bubbles in a milliliter of fluid. So when I take this water and I put it in one of my hydrotherapy tubs, the person is able to soak their body in literally trillions and trillions of negatively charged gas bubbles. And there's always copious amounts of molecular hydrogen that is being liberated from the water through electrolytic means. And then we're able to inject on the end of our device any other gas or blend of gases. And so which gas might be used for which client, that would be up to the practitioner. So we have MDs, we have NDs, and we have even just biohacking clinics that use the technology. I don't make any medical claims for the spa whatsoever. I made a device that generates billions of bubbles per milliliter. And then the studies have already been done in the labs to show what having the body surrounded by a cocoon of that type of an environment is able to do. So we may do something like start them out with 5 to 7 minutes of CO2. There's all kinds of studies on CO2 nanobubbles, and it's a really good vasodilator, and that helps the tissues accept other gases. Another thing is, we're talking about oxygen. In a hyperbaric chamber, you're trying to use pressure to drive oxygen into the tissue. But it's been proven that in order for the cells to actually uptake oxygen, you need a pretty high level of hydrogen on the cell membrane. And so by this water being doped with this nano bioavailable hydrogen, it's providing the hydrogen that's necessary for the oxygen to get into the cells. Another curious thing happens when you're soaking in a tub full of hydrogen nanobubble water, and this is well documented. There's a massive anti-inflammatory and antioxidative stress effect. And that in turn seems to help open up the intracellular oxygen pathways so that inside the cell, the oxygen is able to get through tissues that would otherwise, in an inflamed state, be constricted. So when the hydrogen is there, it opens those pathways up and it lets the oxygen go to the deepest, most hypoxic tissue. And the body decides where it wants to use all these gases. See, our bodies generate nanobubbles, through inspiration when we breathe. There's the lowest layer of the skin is called the endothelial glycocalyx, and it generates CO2 nanobubbles using interstitial foam. And the body uses these for all sorts of things. So when you're soaking in the tub, the body has no way of knowing that fluid that's super saturated with these nanobubbles weren't generated by the body itself. So it just starts putting them to work and using them wherever the body might need it. So we're not treating anything. We're allowing the body's own healing response to be initiated by providing it with a cocoon womb-like environment loaded with gasotransmitters. And
okay. And so once the molecules have entered the system, then the body can direct them wherever it needs to heal or wherever it needs to take them.
Yeah, it's interesting. You can do 5 minutes of CO2 nanobubbles. And if you leave that water in the tub and the next day you come in and the water's basically at room temperature, so, whatever, 70 degrees or something, you can put your hand down in that water and instead of feeling cold, it'll feel cold as soon as it goes in, but within a minute, your hand starts to feel warm. And that's proof that the nano is still in there because the vasodilation effect is occurring and the capillaries are opening up. And so you get a flushing on the skin like it's being warm in warm water, but it's still cold.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah, it's really novel. One of the other things we see is that people are really, really, really dehydrated. And you can drink water all day long, but the water that we drink is not similar to water inside our cells. So the water inside our cells is naturally structured. Gilbert Ling did a lot of research on interstitial water. And, Gerald Pollack has continued that research in the modern era. He calls it easy water, or structured water, or the fourth phase of water. And that's the water inside the cells. And so the water we drink in water bottles from our tap isn't structured. And so people are walking around drinking coffee and energy drinks and all these dehydrating things. And when they get in the tub, if they're really dehydrated, the first time, within 5 minutes, they'll hold their hand up and it'll be pruned, just like they were in like a swimming pool for an hour. And wow. That's an indication they were super dehydrated. Now, after 2 or 3 sessions, it takes longer and longer to get pruny. And maybe by the 3rd or 4th or 5th session, they can be in there for an hour and they don't get pruned up anymore. And the reason is they've actually become hydrated in some cases, maybe the first time since they were in the womb. And it's just an effect of this structured, healing water being, accepted by their body. And it's really good.
Super fascinating. Very cool. So it actually works to hydrate your body, like really hydrate. And
that's right.
How long does that last?
Well, it can last for quite a while. I mean, the hydration effect is going to go away, but the benefits of the gasotransmitters, we had a woman who has suffered from CRPS. They don't exactly know what causes it, but it's one of the most painful conditions known to man, called chronic regional pain syndrome. And she hadn't grown hair on her legs in nearly 20 years due to inflammation. And her pain level for 8 years would vary between 7 and a 10 every day. Every night was a 10. And so, her life became like a living hell. A lot of these women or men, they give them a permanent epidural if their pain is below the waist. And if it's not, they're opioids or they have a very high suicide rate because of the pain levels.
Mm.
And in one, she drove from Rochester, New York, to a clinic that was in the Carolinas, and in 5 days she did 2 sessions a day. By day 2, the hair had started growing on her legs again, and by the end of the 5th day, her pain level was at a 1 from a 10. So she was able to go on a hike and walk up and down stairs normally, which she hadn't done for 8 years. And that effect seemed to last for about 3 months just from one session. So again, this
Wow.
is the body taking the building blocks and doing the repair on its own. It's not attributed to our technology. We're just providing the environment that lets the body heal itself.
Yeah, that's incredible. Now, nanotherapy baths are known to help manage pain for conditions like fibromyalgia and prostate cancer, even. Can you share some more about the kinds of conditions and the results that people have experienced, other than the one that you just shared?
Well, again, I can't make any claims at all about what happens. I can just tell you that the patient experiences have been overwhelming. I mean, especially if for pain conditions, back pain, all kinds of leg pain, and you name it. It's really amazing what happens when you get rid of the inflammation. And
Yeah.
so, we've had clinicians that have used this in their protocol with a bunch of other things, and they've treated things like ALS. Our oldest prototype's been out in a cancer hospital in California. But again, it's just an adjunct. It's not there. She's not using it to treat cancer, but yet
Yeah.
the results are rather stellar. So, I don't make any medical claims. I just make a device that makes really amazing water. And when the body is soaked in it, it takes over and does the rest.
Yeah. So it's something that clinicians are starting to use, and they're doing research around
Yeah,
how it
we've
impacts
seen,
the body.
like they put people in with Lyme disease, and within a few minutes, if they start with maybe say CO2 and then they switch to oxygen, they may feel tingling in all the joints in their body. And that's because it's dragging that into the joint capsules and the cartilage, which is a place that traditional therapies can't address because there's no capillary blood flow to the cartilage and the joint capsule. But you can't hide from water. You know, it
Right.
makes up your entire being. We've had people
Yeah.
deliver ozone via the baths. We've had people deliver CO2, oxygen, molecular hydrogen, and we're working with some physicians to try delivering a breathable form of nitric oxide. That's not something that we're recommending at this point in time, but it has some pretty promising, exciting potentialities. That
Yeah.
would be something more on the medical side.
Now, you also mentioned chemical-free oxygenated pools and whole house treatment systems. What does implementation look like for hospitality or residential developers?
Well, yeah, well for the water systems, it's that system I was describing as far as pre-filtering, vortexing, and structuring. And we do that for houses, for the hospitality industry, for apartments. And when it comes to swimming pools, I moved to Florida about 10 years ago, and my oldest is turning 15 this year. My youngest turned 10, and my middle one turned 13. They were 4, 5, and 6 months. And within a few months of being in Florida, we moved into a nice, beautiful pool home. Their hair went from lustrous and shiny to straw-like and terrible. Their skin got very chalky. And I started doing a lot of real deep digging into chloramines, trihalomethanes, and the other disinfection byproducts from chlorine. And I said, out of the pool, I've got to come up with a better way. I started investigating, all the different remedies that were available in the swimming world. And there are a handful that people claim are chemical free, but when you read the fine print, no, you still have to shock them. The only one that I know of that really works is hydrogen peroxide, but it's not chemical free. You have to add lots and lots of hydrogen peroxide, and it's pretty expensive. It can run $3,000 to $6,000 a summer just in peroxide to keep the pool clean and chlorine free. But it's great. Swimming in a hydrogen peroxide pool is a wonderful experience. But we decided to take that to the next level and develop a nanobubble oxygen swimming pool that is completely chemical free. And so
Nice.
we use oxygen concentrator fed ozone system. So it's a true commercial grade stainless steel cabinet ozone generator like you would use to disinfect bottles at a water bottling factory or something like that. And we've partnered it with mineral ionization to create minerals that stay in the water even when the machine is turned off, that keeps killing an algicide and bacteria. And then we use UV to make sure that everything that's going through is getting treated by ultraviolet rays to further weaken any pathogens that would be going through there. And the ozone then goes into a nanobubble generator. And so it will start out processing the stuff in the water, and then it reverts to O2 nanobubbles. So you're actually swimming in a super oxygenated nanobubble swimming pool. And there are many, many studies that have been done on the benefits of oxygen nanobubbles. There was a study they did on cyclists where they were able to increase their speed by 2.5% and increase their strength between 4 and 7.5%. And they've done studies on a wide variety of other conditions, even shutting off genetic pathways for cancer and all sorts of things in the lab related to oxygen nanobubbles. We've discovered that a combination of oxygen and hydrogen nanotech, when we give it to dairy cows, increases their milk production by about 20%. So this is really, really, cool technology. And, we're losing our dairy farms every year because it's such a low profit margin. And when you can increase the yield of the cattle in terms of milk production, it does a couple of things. It changes the gut flora so that the anaerobes in their gut die off. That's what produces the methane. So people like AOC and some of the environmentally minded citizens that we have wanted to kill all of our dairy cattle to get rid of the methane that's coming from their ruminant, which is their burps, and their flatulence, which is the other end. It's so when you get rid of the anaerobic bacteria in the gut and only the aerobes proliferate, you do away with that methane production. So it extends the life of the milk. It makes the cows healthier, and they're happier, and they give more milk, and their hoofs get shinier, and their hair gets healthier, and it's just a cascade of effects that happen when you deal with the inflammation. And that's what happens in the body. You get rid of inflammation, and then it creates a cascade of healing effects throughout the body. So one of the guys that was up for the head of the FDA 2 or 3 times over the last decade is quoted as saying the root of all degenerative disease that we have today is hypoxia due to or induced by inflammation. So when you get rid of the inflammation and you allow that oxygen to get to that hypoxic tissue, it does away with all sorts of things.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of opportunity for agriculture and creating more, I guess, sustainability in that regard too.
Yeah, I myself had an eczema problem for over 45 years. I've been to doctors as far away as India, the Soviet Union, Russia now, not Soviet Union, but all these places I've been to. I've been to doctors in Indonesia, all over the U.S. None of them could get rid of it. And by just drinking my own nano water over the course of 7 weeks, it all went away. And so by healing the gut, you change a lot of different conditions.
Amazing. I think a lot more research needs to be done in the areas in which it can help in curative, I guess, and treatments. I mean, I know there is research currently happening in the world of nanoparticles, and excited to follow that and learn more.
Oh yeah, for drug delivery. So they'll put they'll nanotize a particular type of drug They put it inside the nanobubbles through some equipment like mine. And then when they, like, say there's a tumor, they can take an ultrasound wand and right over the location, they can excite and break the bubbles to deliver the payload of the medicine at that situs point.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've spoken to other guests who are in the, middle of developing that kind of technology with nanoparticles as delivery systems for drugs, and that's fascinating. Yeah, but this is with water, and
yes, and I'm the most excited about the beverage world because we have a lot of really neat adaptogens that have been uncovered and discovered and really researched over the last 10 to 15 years. That with groundbreaking research and really amazing results, if we can just nanotize those, we can then deliver those via a nanobubble in a beverage system and have functional sports drinks, not just, colored sugar water. We
right.
can have, oxygen water that actually makes you feel good without having to have caffeine in it. We can even make oxygen soda pop that, if we used a different sugar like allulose and some natural flavorings, we could make that, taste like regular soda pop, but actually deliver some bang for your buck.
Yeah. Now, what was the toughest part of turning an idea into a dependable product people can run every day?
Well, the toughest part is always raising the funds. So, in my own business, I've relied on the sale of my own products and I've self-funded everything that I've ever done. But it's, going to the next level. If you wanted to challenge a big beverage company or something like that, it takes money. And so I would say that's the same challenge with every industry. The biggest and hardest thing to do is, coming up with the funds.
Yeah, and I have certainly heard that across the board as well.
You asked me before about, how do I solve problems? Well, in my house, my children have one main swear word that they're not allowed to say, and that word is can't.
I love that.
So they're taught when they want to say can't, they then have to ask themselves a question, how can I?
Yeah, turn it around. Absolutely. It's shifting that mindset, much more powerful because, like you said, the impossible is not a thing. It's just how do you make it possible?
That's right.
Right, just shifting that mindset. Now, water is different everywhere in the world. How do you make sure your systems work in different countries, from Boston to Bali and everywhere in between?
Well, we would like to start if it's a municipal source in a not a third world but a first world country, it's within a set of parameters typically because they're government mandated, and that would be the standard filtration system that we offer for everyone. If they're using a well or some other lake or something like that, we would get a water report, send it to my water engineers, and we would design a custom pre-filtration system to make sure that they're starting with really good water.
Okay. And what checks do you make sure or use to make sure the quality stays as high as possible as you grow?
Well, as long as you have tested the source water and you put in a system you just design a filter change schedule that's commensurate with the contaminant. And as long as you follow that schedule, it'll always be that way. And you can always run water samples anytime you want to make sure that it's staying in your parameters. But as long as you've put the forethought into your scheduling, it's not difficult.
Yeah. And your technology touches everything from wellness to agriculture. If you could see it adopted worldwide, what kind of global change would you hope it would create?
Well, my primary thing that I'd like to fix is agriculture. In our country, we are being poisoned by the way we grow our food. And so, in the soil, there are bacteria that are necessary to affix minerals to root hairs of plants. And we have been spraying chemicals on our crops for so long. We're only putting back 3 minerals, which is NPK. And it takes 72 trace elements to create full genetic expression in any plant or animal. And so our crops, our soils have been stripped out of the minerals for so long. The bacteria, the good bacteria, have been killed off. through this routine application of pesticides that we really need to revitalize the way that we grow our crops. So starting with good, structured water, nano water, those are all great steps, but we actually have to reintroduce the bacteria that's, grown in a virgin soil, so that we're introducing thousands of kinds of bacteria back into the soil. And then we've got to add the trace elements. And the best way to do that is using ocean minerals. The ocean already has this, 96 trace elements that are needed for full genetic expression. And we can make these out of the salt that's being pulled out of our desalination plants. We can go away from NPK fertilization, go to ocean-based mineralization and bacterial blends on our soil. The reason we put pesticides on crops is we're growing unhealthy plants. A healthy plant produces its own set of essential oils that prevents the bugs and pests from destroying it. So when a crop needs to have a pesticide sprayed on it to stay alive, that's because it's an unhealthy crop. And Mother Nature is trying to destroy it to get rid of the bad genetic material and have a healthy plant survive. So we look at everything through a backward lens in modern agriculture. And we really need to go back to the basics and change our fundamentals.
Right. Like you said at the beginning, let nature show us how it, takes care of itself. So instead of salvaging or using artificial means to salvage unhealthy plants, replenish the soil and, using water and using, salts that have all of the nutrients that we need.
There's another terrible crime we do today. We don't plow the fields anymore. And the story is that it's for stopping erosion. So they do what's called no-till seed drilling. So they drill right into the dirt and put the seed in there over top of the stubble from last year's crop. Well, what happens the following, in the springtime, as soon as the canopy of the new crop gets higher than the stubble, it blocks the light. So now the stubble is sitting on top of the soil rotting, and molds love to break down the cellulose that's on that stubble. So whether it's soybean or corn or wheat or barley or any crop, that stubble becomes mold food. Now in the fall, when we come and we turn the beater bars of the combines to harvest the next crop, mold has a defense mechanism called bursting or sporulating. It's like, you got me, poof, here's my babies. And so that cloud of spore erupts and it gets sucked into the grain wagons, and all of our grains are contaminated by mycotoxins, which are mold poisons, and physical spores themselves. And we're doing nothing to stop it. And we wonder why we're getting bloated and fat and sick and dead. It's not just the chemicals, it's even the farming practice. And the farmers, they save 3 steps. So they think, well, okay, this is a great new invention. Now I don't have to plow, right. I don't have to disc, and I don't have to color pack. Those are 3 time-consuming jobs. But it's still resulting in, unhealthy crops. That soil needs to be turned under to put the nitrogen-forming bacteria and let the bacteria break the stuff down instead of mold.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Now, you've tackled challenges across a lot of industries, even in this conversation. We've talked about quite a few. What keeps you personally motivated to keep pushing boundaries and solving these big problems?
Well, I look to God for all inspiration. So I believe that I'm just a steward and that God is the source of all creative ideas and witty inventions. It says that in the book of Proverbs chapter 8, that God will give you creative ideas and witty inventions. And so I just believe I'm a receiver, and it's my job to embody and be a steward to the good ideas and that he gives me. And that's really my statement of faith.
Yeah, you're main motivating force.
Yes.
And what big problems do you hope people will say your technology helps solve in 5 years from now?
Well, I'd really like to see people start drinking. If we're going to be a consumer society and drink bottled water and energy drinks and sports drinks. I'd like them to become healthy.
Yeah.
So
So
that's
just
my
a
next
better
arena.
practice of drinking, or I guess just people becoming educated too, as well, right? And as
Sure.
the technology becomes more available, people becoming aware of the benefits
So
and
that's what
then
we're
consuming more.
seeking investment right now to launch a healthy bottled water, a healthy sports drink, and a healthy energy drink.
Right.
Those are the three main market segments that are poisoning people at the convenience stores every day.
Yeah, with so much sugar and processed, chemicals. Are your waters available right now? I know you have a website and you list the waters on there. Are they commercially available?
Not right now, just only some small clinics. I have sold some machines to so they can provide them to their clients, but
Okay.
commercially, they're being sold overseas under the brand name KURE Oxygen, but
Uh-huh.
in the US, no.
Okay. Well, still a work in progress.
That's right.
So, Charles, thank you for walking us through your journey and the incredible innovations you're bringing to water and wellness. For those who want to learn more and get involved, how can they best contact you?
They can visit energizelivingwater.com or nanohydrotherapy.com to learn more about the hydrotherapy solutions, the NBOT, and to get whole house filtered water. If they're looking for a chemical free, healthy swimming pool, that's nanobubblepool.com.
So, listeners, be sure to check out Charles's website or websites. I guess there's more than one for the different products. Yeah. And
Thank you
to our
so much,
listeners,
Leanne.
yes, of course. Yeah, I really appreciate you joining the show. Super interesting technology. I think there's a lot of potential here, and I'm excited to see how it develops
I
and
appreciate you.
following your journey. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this conversation, please follow and subscribe to Industry Ignited on your favorite podcast platform. And until next time, stay bold, stay curious, and keep igniting industry.